So now I'm back to this one. You can see I've done a little bit more with the green. I kind of added a little bit more of a lighter green up here because I didn't want quite so much white space. I'm not covering it up. Each layer is not covering it up because what's the point of me putting the orange down if I'm going to cover it up entirely with green? So maybe there's a little bit more green, you know, that I do up there. But, you know, if you look at how objects work and how they reflect light, anything that's next to something else, if you have a really bright red shirt on and somebody's sitting next to you and the light's bouncing off of your shirt, then the person sitting next to you is gonna get a little bit of a red glow to them, right? Right now I'm gonna work on this one. I'm gonna make this one red, and you can see I just added some yellow. This is still a little bit damp. It's not totally wet, but it's not 100% dry because I kind of want to talk through a little bit of the wet on wet, you know, kind of technique and if colors mix together and how that works. So once again, I can come in here with my red. I'm not doing a wet on wet on this per se, but I'm going to start out by putting some red here. So I am going to add a little bit of water to kind of soften this as it goes. I can do that dragging out as my brush dries. I can get a little bit of that stripiness if I want to. Right now I have a damp brush. I don't really have a lot of paint on it. And I'm kind of mixing the red and the yellow together. So I had told you that I had just done the yellow. Okay? So these two colors are going to merge together a little bit. Like if I drop in a little bit of that yellow right there. No, the technical term is not mush, but as we work with these different techniques and everything, sometimes sound effects help. So I can come back through here and I can add the yellow back in with the red so that these two can kind of play around a little bit. And red and yellow are going to make orange, right? So if I want that to happen, I can, okay? If I want to kind of do a little bit farther, let it kind of come over here and add something a little bit more interesting over here. But it's pretty puddly right there. You can see down here, it's pretty damp. So see how the red and the yellow have kind of come together a little bit, okay? So maybe I want that. What if you want more red? What if you want a darker concentration of red? I think you know the answer to that. We can add that in. So once again, there is, remember, a limit to how much your paper can handle. You should be able to kind of be on the watch for if your paper is starting to kind of deteriorate. Okay? So if I want to come back in with a little bit of a darker red again, I can definitely do that. We said how colors kind of bounce off each other. When you look at the original photo, there's actually a little bit of red that's reflecting onto this. So right now, while it's wet, I know I've said I have to have really distinct edges. Can I let a little bit of red like kind of bounce over to here? I can, as long as I'm okay with that. What that means is that I am going to have to come back and define the edge, which I'm planning on doing that with blue or purple right here, right? So if I want a little bit of that red to kind of travel through that, I could. Could I come back with a little bit of red when the edge is dry and just do what I did here and just paint the red on? Sure. But sometimes it is nice to have a little bit of like unity between your objects. So I kind of want to just show you that that's actually, like, you know, a technique that some of you guys may want to actually play around with. Okay? And it's okay to do that. So there is time and place for you to let your objects kind of run together a little bit. So now my edge is gone. I'm okay with that because I can come back to it. But if you look closely here, okay, you can see the shine of where it's really wet. Okay, you can see that shine where it's really, really wet. So remember, the shinier it is, it means it's pretty wet, and it means it's gonna be spreading. So now you guys can see my edge is gone. I'm gonna have to come back and get that, okay? Can you also start to see, that's when I have to stop. This paper has kind of had all it can. As you rework the paper and it's wet, what happens is that the paper starts kind of deteriorating, and like little bits of the paper kind of start coming up. If I were to keep going, the paper would actually start kind of falling apart. So this is an example of paper that's kind of been pushed a little farther than it should. So I can't paint on this part. I have to just leave it be, okay? So we'll move on to the next part after we've let this dry a little bit. So I mixed a little bit of yellow with that green to get kind of more of a Granny Smith kind of green. So I am going to kind of hit a little bit of this area. You can still see the orange through it, not covering it up, but especially up here where, you know, we had a lot of white. Since this Granny Smith kind of green is so, you know, nice and bright yellow, and it's still a super light color. I come in here and I'm kind of just bouncing back a little bit more green. So now we're going to come in with our cool color. We've let this dry. I showed you how you could let those two edges bleed together right now, right? So you can see I put a little bit of red, because if a green apple is sitting next to a red apple, a little bit of that color bounces back. I went through and brushed a little bit of red over some of the green to kind of balance it out, so that there's a little bit of red over here as well. So there's a little bit of red, there's a little bit of red, there's a little bit of red. It's real subtle. I could have just brushed that over and stayed consistent, which normally I probably would have, but I wanted to show you guys that you could do it this way. So now what I would do is brush back over maybe a little kind over the red, so that the red's kind of subtle underneath, and then I can do this kind of effect, this bright green or this dark green, and I kind of put that over it so that the red is underneath the green in terms of layering. Okay, so now we've kind of gone over this before, so I'm just gonna throw down a little bit of purple for you guys on this apple right here so you can kind of see it. Maybe add a little bit of purple down here. Always have a test paper. Sometimes I just use whatever scraps, you know, around, that way I can see how heavy is my purple amount. You can tell though this is not a huge brush, this is a round brush. I'm kind of just spreading this, brushing it over. It's real subtle and real soft amount. I'm not putting a ton of purple. Because remember, as I layer this with watercolor, the beauty of it is that I can see all those other colors. So I can still see a little bit of orange down here. I can still see a little bit of green down here. I can see a little hint of purple, okay? So you can see here, this is a real kind of subtle approach to putting a little bit of cool color down here, which is going to help it look like it's rounding down. So that's a little bit more obvious of a shadow for you to just kind of show you the difference, okay? I would probably have stuck with the first one in that respect, just for me personally. You know, there's different techniques. I'm trying to show you guys like the different styles you can do in terms of layering or wet on wet and all these different types. But you personally are going to end up deciding a style that you like, that you're comfortable with. So as you layer on some of these other colors, you might want the purple to be super subtle, like I kind of had at the beginning, right? But this is definitely going to give you a lot more of a 3D approach, okay? If you think there's too much purple going on, remember how we said to have paper handy nearby? As long as the water and the paint is wet, take a piece of paper, kind of do this, don't scrub it back and forth. Put it on and kind of just push lightly down on it and then lift it off, okay? So what happens is it comes off onto that and you get this back, okay? So you can do that if you're getting a little bit concerned that you have too much. You do have to go back in and kind of touch it up. But that lifting off technique is really helpful for when we get to like a landscape and you're doing clouds and that sort of thing. So we'll get into that more, but just wanted to kind of point that out to some of you guys who maybe are like, it's too much. Same thing over here. Now I got, especially right here, one of the reasons I wanted to do this too on the apple with the red is that I've lost my edge. It's a little harder to tell where one stops and where one begins. So I'm gonna show you a little bit. I'm gonna turn my paper over. Since I'm working on this edge, you know, a little more comfortable working that direction. Okay, so this ended up a little bit of a softer wet on wet approach for the shadow. There's definitely a lot more depth. Same thing up here, same thing in here. If I want to make this even more, it's got a good contrast. You know, we talked about the 3D effect. This is much darker than the edge because I kept that white. If I put a little bit of purple in here, you can kind of see the difference from there to there, okay? One part definitely looks deeper than the other. It'd be the same thing up here if I put the purple on this part. Use the orange and the yellow that's already in it, okay? So you can see the difference between that and that. If that's too purple and you don't like that much purple, grab a piece of paper before it dries. You can pull up a little bit of it, and then you can always go back and do a little bit more red over it if you want to. So we just pulled up like this, a teeny bit, so you can kind of see how you can grab that real quick if you need to. Okay? All right, so whole project. You're going to paint this, okay? You can use whatever colors on your palette, except no white, no brown, and no black. Everything else, okay? You can make these apples any color you want to, as long as it's somewhat of an apple-y color. So like you said, you know, you can kind of see this one is green. Kind of went a little excessive on the purple right there as we were talking, right? But green, red, orangey, yellow, there's yellow apples for sure. There's no purple apples. And there's no blue apples, so you're not going to use purple or blue as the base color, but you're going to be able to integrate any colors. If I wanted to use a little bit of this bright pink, I could definitely put that in. That would look great right here. A little bit of pink might even look good in here. So you can still experiment with colors. Your goal is to make this kind of photo into a more interesting painting. You're going to be able to use a variety of colors. Try and utilize your cool colors for shadows. Do a background if you want to, like we talked about the other day, and the shadows. I tried to model a few different techniques. So this one is more of a, it started out, you know, with the base color, like these in the background, okay? And this first one, remember at the very beginning, this apple started out just that light yellowy and green, right? Actually started at yellow and orange, and then we added the green. So then I built up all these different layers. This one's a little bit of a dry brush approach where I kind of dragged it. So remember that you also can do this style. This is more of a wet on wet approach. So this approach is great. This is definitely more interesting than the photo. If you want a little bit more of a realistic approach where you're seeing, you know, brush strokes as you paint, that's fine too. Watercolor has a lot of different techniques and a lot of different styles. So all of your apples are based on the same photo, but now you guys should be able to come up with apples that are your own and in the style that you want to do. All right, that's it.